Hey, what's up, everybody? I hope that you are doing well. One of the things that's been on my mind a lot recently is just that the show has grown so much over this last year. Thank you guys so much. But so many of you started recently in the last year or two, and there's so much content we did from back in the day that none of you have ever heard. So back on an episode a long time ago, back in 2017, I had C2Six, Carlos Zamora, on the show, and it might be one of my favorite interviews I've ever done. This was back when the show was live on the radio. So we were there on Tuesday nights, 7 o'clock every night. And what would happen is we would call the guests, we would get them in, we had a 3-minute break, and we would do the interview, and then 18 minutes later we had another 3-minute break. And I would always, just like the show is now, I'd stop the interview, and then they would leave, and then we'd move on to the next segment. But we had 3 minutes to do that. And I was like, at the end of the interview, I was so intrigued by this guy's story that I was like, can you stay for another segment? Like, this is tremendous. So he talks about his rap career. He was super into rap and hip hop. He actually opened for some of my favorite artists from whenever I was a kid. And he had a huge conversion at one of his concerts. And it led him out of the gang life, out of the rap life, and into Catholicism deeply. And he's been doing great things in the church and in ministry since. I actually got to hang out with him a couple of months ago. And when he rolled into town, we went and got some Mexican food, and it was awesome. The first time that we had met after doing this interview many years ago. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Unfortunately, it is just audio because we just started recording video a few months ago. But it's so good that I had to share it with you. God bless you guys, and I hope that you enjoy this conversation I had with Carlos Zamora, C2Six. Alrighty, we are back. You are listening to Forte Catholic on Red Sea Radio. If you're just joining us, welcome in, either live or you're listening on the podcast. It is great to be here, having you tune in today. And I am so privileged today to be talking to a man I've been looking forward to interviewing here for a couple of weeks, or maybe a couple of months now, Mr. Carlos Zamora. Carlos, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, man. I'm a little tired, but I'm using all the energy I got left for this radio show. At 8 o'clock, I'm just going to pass out. How's that sound?
Sounds like a deal.
Yeah, so Carlos, I've seen you from afar for a while, and we just started talking, and I'm looking forward to getting to know you a little bit more and allowing the audience to get to know you a little bit more as well. I know that you're a rapper, hip-hop artist. Is there a difference? I was wondering.
There's a difference between a rapper and a hip-hop artist. But you know what? I think anybody can rap, and they call themselves a rapper, but I think somebody who puts together just some authentic music, and really just create songs that can really, resonate with the people. That's a hip hop artist. I think that's the difference to me.
When you say everyone can rap, I'm assuming you haven't heard my mixtape from when I was in 7th grade.
hey, I bet you it wasn't bad.
Oh, it was absolutely terrible. So yeah, your stage name C2Six, former gangster rapper turned Catholic hip hop artist, evangelist, and apologist. So that's where we can read that on your website. But we want to get to know you, man. So who are you? How'd you grow up? Let's just get going through your life, because you've had an intense life, and I feel like it's going to change some people's hearts today.
Well, like you said, I was, involved in gangster rap. Prior to being involved in gangster rap, I'm from Fort Worth, Texas. So a lot of people are not aware that Fort Worth in the late 80s, early 90s was the highest crime rate and murder rate per capita in the nation.
Wow.
For a long period of time. So there was a lot of gangs, a lot of drugs, a lot of just craziness going on. And it was just really easy to get involved, whether it be through friends or family or whatever, just stuff going on in the neighborhood or whatever. Just real easy to get involved. So I kind of went down that path of, getting involved with gangs and drugs and partying and all that whatnot. I don't like to get too into the gory details of it, because I think it's more about the journey and the destination as opposed to where I came from. But like I said, just to give people an idea, just during my high school years, I had 26 friends of mine that were murdered for gang and drug violence.
Wow, man,
Just
I'm
here
sorry to hear that.
locally,
That's intense.
yeah, it was crazy. A lot of those guys were friends of mine, good friends of mine, and you know, people kind of give gangsters or thugs, a bad rap. And maybe some of it's justified, but I think a lot of times those guys are deep down inside are really good guys that would give you the shirt off their back, or give you their last dollar if they had to, just to give you something to eat. Or I've seen it. So I try my best to kind of reach out to those guys and find that ray of light, that ray of light, and try to develop that and try to nourish that to help guide them back to the faith.
Yeah, I think that's a theme that's going to run through as I was kind of reading your bio and all these things. I think that's a thing that's going to be a thread throughout our conversation, is that in the midst of even the darkness of your life and in the darkness of this gangster lifestyle, like you said, there's still some light in that culture that I think you've been able to bring in to Catholicism, right? We talk about this all the time on the show. It's like test everything and retain what is true, good, and beautiful. So you've been able to retain what's true, good, and beautiful out of this rap culture, this hip hop culture, without some of the negative things, right? So that's going to be something that's going to go through this our entire conversation. But I know you don't want to get into the details, but like, what was faith like? How did you view faith? How did you view God when you were living this gangster lifestyle?
You know what? The funny thing is that I think it's a grace in and of itself that I was never struggling with the idea of believing in God, right? My struggle was I didn't believe that God loved me.
Wow.
And I always knew He was there, and I always believed in Him, and I always had a certain amount of reverence. I just didn't believe He loved me. Just some of the things that I had been through in my life, losing friends, losing my parents. My mom died from cancer. My dad passed away recently, about 4 years ago. I just always struggled with the feeling, that God doesn't love me, or maybe God doesn't care about me, or whatever. And so that was kind of my view growing up, and so I was very nominal Catholic, and this maybe even an overstatement. We went to church every Sunday. I did my sacraments and everything, and but I don't recall anything that I learned in any of my CCD classes or my confirmation classes. And I was busy, trying to go party afterwards, or trying to holler at the girl at the confirmation class that I liked, or whatever it was.
Hey, I think that's the reason about 90% of guys go. I think there are 10% that are like good, holy kids in high school. The rest of us went because they were pretty girls, so I can understand that part of it for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's like, I work with young people. It's heart-wrenching for me to hear that you believe God was real. That wasn't the problem, but that you thought He didn't care for you, that He didn't love you. So, like, what changed, man? Because I know that there are some people listening that might even struggle with that on a small scale or even a large scale. What changed? How did things change for you? Where did this conversion come from?
Well, kind of like I said, it's always been in the back of my mind and in my heart. Like I said, my mother was a devout Catholic, and my dad was kind of a nominal Catholic, but he was Catholic, and he that was one thing that he did do is he did demand that we go to church every Sunday with our mom, even if he didn't go. But he did make sure that we went, and so it was always in the back of my mind. Doing the gangster rap stuff was crazy because I kind of was just doing whatever made money or whatever, popular, or, just as long as it was sounding good, I didn't care what I was saying, right? And then we were asked to do a concert in the old group that I used to be part of, locally, for about 1,500 people. And they told me it was an all ages event. And I wasn't sure what that meant, an all ages event. I was just like, pay me and I'll be there. And so I get there, come to find out, an all ages event is pretty much just another word for a teen event, like a teen concert or teen show. So when we get there, it's about 1,500 people, but they're all between the ages of, they're all at the middle school and high school age. And I'm there, and I was just like, man, you got to be kidding me. I don't have anything better to say to these kids than, smoke this and drink that and shoot this dude and whatever we were saying, right? all the craziness.
I
And I
suddenly
was like,
feel
I should be
bad for
telling
the
them.
things I'm saying. What's happening to me?
Exactly. It was the conviction that was just like, that was a conviction that I had never felt. It was the first time that I really kind of saw what I was doing for what it was and the reality of what it was, and I was corrupting minds. That's basically what I was doing. And it was just crazy because the kids listened to us and they really looked up to us and they knew all of our lyrics. And if we said jump up and down, they jumped up and down. Said put your hands up, they put their hands up. It was crazy. And so I talked to the promoter in the backstage area, and I was like, dude, you should be ashamed of yourself, man. You got a bunch of gangster rappers rapping for kids. And this was actually, I think, kind of the defining moment. And I don't even know if he's aware of it, but he just looked at me and he was like, I'm not the one rapping it. You should be ashamed of
I
yourself.
was about to say, isn't that the most common response of all of us? It's like, it's not my fault. It's your fault, you dummy.
Yeah. But you know what? I was kind of like, point taken. Point taken. You're right. I should be ashamed of myself. And I'm sure I was laughed at the whole night and maybe even for weeks following because I went to the VIP area. It was kind of like blocked off from everybody else. And I sat at our table and I sat there and I cried for like 2 hours straight, nonstop.
Wow.
I couldn't help it. I didn't know what came over me. And I just prayed and I was just like, God, I don't know, where you're calling me to or what's going on here. I know it's you. And, I think that was the first time that I really felt like God loved me. So I was like, I can feel you trying to make a change in my life now. I can feel that conviction,
Yeah. So
and I think that's where it kind of overcame that.
yeah, so you had this intense moment of this conviction. So what were some of the next steps where you actually started to feel this love from God and you started building this relationship with him that has built up over the last many years?
Well, it actually took me leaving the church for a little while. I know it sounds kind of ironic or kind of weird. Um, at the time, I was kind of talking to some Protestant brothers and some non-denominational Christians, and no love lost for those guys. They're I still consider them brothers in Christ and everything. But they kind of talked me out of the Catholic Church, and I started attending these like non-denominational churches or just pretty much any church that would. I was just basically church hopping, right? And I loved God, and I was like, well, I got to start doing Christian rap. I can't do gangster rap anymore. And so I started trying to write songs, only to find out that I don't know anything about my faith. How am I going to write about this if I don't know anything?
You sit down to write a song, you get like 2 lines in, you're like, what rhymes with God?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know any other words for Christian stuff. That's hilarious.
Exactly. And so it was kind of like that. I was kind of like, I need to fill my mind. I need to go pray and study the Word, and I need to go to church. I need to do anything I can do to fill my mind with knowledge so I can actually rap about it and be authentic with it, right? I mean, I can make generic songs, but I don't like making generic songs, right? And so as I was studying, and I know this is a common theme with a lot of reverts or even converts. As I was studying, everything kept pointing me to Catholicism. Everything, and I was challenged by somebody to read the Church Fathers, right? Early Church Fathers. So I did, and just a warning to anybody who's listening: if you read the Church Fathers, you will not stay away from the Catholic Church for very long.
I'll put that warning big in on the description of the podcast. I'll make a big warning. If you listen to this podcast, you might become or stay Catholic. Watch out.
Exactly, yeah. And so what kind of sealed the deal for me, though, in coming back to my cradle faith was that I never really understood, or it seems like I had never heard that we believed in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. And keep in mind, I was about 30 years old already at this time. I'm an old man now, but
it's okay. But, I look old, so we got that going for us.
And so I was like, how did I never hear this? Or this can't be true. I don't remember ever believing this as a kid or growing up. And it was because I heard somebody from one of the churches I was going to tell me that, Catholics believe Jesus is in the Eucharist, and he's not really. And I was like, no, we don't believe that. He's like, yeah, that's exactly what you believe. And I was like, okay, well, let me go find out. And sure enough, that's what we believe. And I started trying to prove it wrong, and only to prove to myself that it was true. That Jesus is truly present in the Eucharist. And I just told myself, I was like, if that's Jesus, I can't just continue to say I love him and then turn around and walk away from the Eucharist.
Right. No.
Go to another church because I like the way this guy preaches, or because I like the choir, or because I like whatever the case is.
Yeah,
That's Jesus in the Eucharist.
I think about that all the time. It's like, oh, the homily was terrible, the music was terrible, and I think of Jesus looking at me and saying, like, but to whom will you go? It's like, you could go get nice music or nice preaching, but you get me when you come to Mass. And like, that's honestly what always has kept me Catholic. And I had a similar situation where you said you were seeking in the non-denominational Protestant world, and I did the same thing in junior high. I was seeking for this real relationship with Jesus, and I couldn't find it in the Catholic Church. And then I found that relationship in a non-denominational church, and I had it's so crazy how many years apart, but similar story. It was the Eucharist for me, man. Like, I was like, if this really is Jesus, then this is the church, and I came back. So it's cool that we have that in common. I always wanted to feel like I was cool and be a fake gangster, but I never did. So you're a lot cooler than I am. Speaking of cool, I just have to take a side note. One of the things in your bio, before we we're like getting out into your conversion time, when you were in gangster rap, you played with you did an event with Bone Thugs and Harmony. I love Bone Thugs and Harmony. They're awesome.
Yeah, actually, Busy Bone was probably like the face of the group for Bone Thugs and Harmony. He's a main guy. He was featured on one of our albums.
Really?
And then he turned around and he asked us if we could use the song for his album, and so we signed him the song over to him, the licensing and everything, and he ended up using it on 4 different solo albums.
Dang, that's crazy.
Which is kind of cool.
I love. Yeah, so, I tried that. I tried so hard. Can't seem to get away from misery. I love that song, man. It's good times.
Until just recently, Both of Us was the highest selling hip hop group of all time.
No way. I did not know. Who took him over?
Yeah, Outkast.
Oh. My baby don't mess around.
Yeah. So we also did some work with Cypress Hill.
Dude, that's
of course
awesome.
They're one of the elites as well as far as hip hop goes.
Yeah, for sure.
So that was pretty cool. And we did a lot of stuff with we opened up shows for people like Fat Joe or 3-6 Mafia or Ludacris and
dude
South Park Mexican from my Texas people.
Yeah. Dude, this is we're talking about my childhood here, man. We really are.
Yeah.
I was the white kid that wanted to be cool and try to fit in with the crowd. So I want to get in, and what I want to do is we're about to have to go to a break, but could you stick around for a few minutes after the break so we can keep talking? I have a few more questions for you.
Definitely.
Perfect. I got one more question before we hit the break. So I want to just kind of wrap up this conversation about where you didn't feel that God loved you. Like, when was that moment for you? You said you had this big conviction moment at the concert, but when was the first time that you realized that God loves you?
I think it was that same night. Like I said, I was thinking that was the first time I could actually feel him trying to draw me back to him. And I'm sure he was drawing me the whole time, but that was the first time I could actually feel it. And it was tangible for me. And I think that's why I was crying so much, because I think that's when you realize that God loves you, there's no greater feeling to know that God loves you,
Dude, that's so intense, because in hearing the story, I would have assumed it would have come much later because you had this deep conviction, but I'm guessing that you felt God's mercy even still. And that's man, that's such a cool story, man. So thanks for sharing. Stick around. We are going to keep talking to you here in just a few minutes. I want to get into some of your music and let the folks hear what kind of stuff you have for us. So I'm talking with Carlos Zamora. We will be right back after the break. All right, we are back for our final segment of Forte Catholic for the evening. I'm talking with Carlos Zamora. He joined us in the last segment, and we have so much to talk about that I asked him to stick around for a few more minutes, and he is very generous, and he is back with us again. So, Carlos, you are a Catholic hip hop artist. We talked about your conversion. So here's what I want to talk about now. What was the impact that rap or hip hop had on you before your conversion? How did it shape your life? How did it make you think? Like, what was the biggest thing that it did for you?
I'm a hip hop fanatic, and I have been since the first time I heard Run DMC in third grade, and it was just speaking my language. You know, it was something I could relate to. I could feel it. It was, it felt like it was coming from where I was coming from. It felt like it was saying everything that was on my mind. It felt like it was just speaking to me, right? And so that was the impact that it had on me. I just developed a passion for it, you know?
The logical next question, especially with your conversion that you had it at this concert where you're doing this gangster rap for kids and you were like, I can't do this, right? So like,
Yeah.
What impact do you think that this hip hop culture has on youth culture, for better or for worse?
I mean, I hate to kind of like generalize, but I think there are a lot of youth that can relate, that do listen, especially in the I hate to say it, but in the urban and more minority communities where I think there is a lack of resources or ministerial effort, right? So I mean, I think that it's very helpful there, but I think we also have to be authentic with it. I think I was mentioning to you earlier that I think sometimes the church, not the church, but some of the church officials, the church people, they kind of think we're trying to use hip hop as a ploy to lure the unsuspecting listener into the faith, and if you're doing it as that, then it's probably not being done right. We're just making music from the heart. Hip hop is the music that we grew up listening to, that we really feel like we can communicate through, and we try to be authentic with it. Make it sounds like it's new. It sounds modern. It sounds real. It doesn't sound like just some watered down or just like it's a tool for evangelization. This is actual art that's being used for evangelization. And so I think even the kids who aren't so much into hip hop, I think they can appreciate good music or good art, right?
Yeah.
Even not even just the kids. I think even adults or young adults or adults, they can appreciate good music, good art, and they can tell whether or not it's coming from the heart, whether or not it's authentic. And I think any music, especially hip hop, I think because it has more of an in your face type of feel to it, can be a great tool for evangelization. Great tool.
It's so interesting you say that because I work with young people, and one of the biggest things that they need and that they can see through is they need authenticity and they can see fake, man. So it's interesting that in your life, hip hop has always been authentic for you. When you were living the gangster lifestyle, that's the rap you did. When you had a conversion and started living for God, that's the rap you did. You were always completely you in your art, and there's something in that is true, good, and beautiful. And speaking of the true, good, and beautiful, in that transfer or in your shift over into Christian hip hop, what parts of that lifestyle, what parts of hip hop were good that you brought over, and what were some of the unholy parts that you were like, let's get this out of here?
Well, obviously, like anything that was vulgar or promoted violence or anything immoral, leave that out. Something that I personally like, I like lyrics a lot. I like artists to have well planned out, well thought out lyrics. So the lyricism, I brought that over. A great beat. I think people like to hear a great beat. So if you can have a great beat, I mean, it's creativity. It's art. We're all supposed to create, right? That's part of God's God's plan for us. And so that we brought that over. I think even some of the imagery, because as much as we don't like to admit it, sometimes I think we are kind of drawn to things that are similar to us. People that sound like us or talk like us or that look like us or that come from where we come from. So being able to kind of maintain some of the imagery that's not bad. Like my bald head, for example, my shaved bald head, or just kind of wearing maybe a little bit baggy clothes, whatever. Not sagging the pants, down below your butt or anything like that.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
It's a little bit of a bagginess to it, but just the stuff like that. from the outside looking in, they can see you and be like, hey, you know what? This guy's not too much different than me. He sounds like he's coming from where I'm coming from. I can relate to that, and so I think that it's something we brought over as well from doing the gangster rap.
So what impact do you think hip hop and the things that you're doing can have on the young people in the church?
Oh, you know what? I think it can have a lot of impact. Just an example, and I'm sure we'll talk about it here shortly, but we went to the World Youth Day in Brazil in 2013, and we performed over there. We had actually four or five different concerts throughout the week while we were there, and we had two groups of teens from Brazil. They formed their own Catholic hip hop groups after that, after seeing what we did.
Wow.
And they've been posting videos and posting up music and stuff like that. And it's cool to see what they're doing now, and to know that we were at least part of the reason why they got started doing that. So I think I think we just encourage people to be excited about their faith and to not to be ashamed to express it and whatever it is they're doing.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's so interesting how God works, man, because we planned on only having you for the second segment, and I had something planned for the third segment. What I had planned in the third segment is something that you just said. It was a Bible study I was doing the other day, and I learned that the word enthusiasm comes from the Greek roots of en theos, meaning in God. So that the more that you get into God, the more of God's Spirit gets into you, and the more impassioned you become. So, like, it's when you were passionate about hip hop, these kids were passionate about hip hop, and it's the moment that people realize I can use my passions, perfect them in God's light, and still use them. Like, you didn't have to give away hip hop when you became Christian. It continues. It said that when we get out of our comfort zone is when we grow, and that Jesus is a perfect example of using this passion. Like, Jesus may have been meek and mild, but he also had a wild side. He touched lepers, which was, you couldn't do that. He celebrated Samaritans, stopped storms, exorcised demons, ate with sinners, healed on the Sabbath, turned funeral processions into parades. And even the way he died, what's that week called? It's called Passion Week, right? Like, so God doesn't want to crucify our passions. He wants to resurrect them, right? He wants to, if we want to follow in Jesus' footsteps, his passion will refine us and define us. He wants to use our passions for his purposes. So it's so cool to have you on, because I think you're a perfect example of that, and you're inspiring that in other young people.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. So, man, it's so neat. That's the whitest thing I've ever said in the world. It's so neat to have you on to talk about this gangster rap. So, like, your whole story, man, that we've talked throughout the day, the fact that you can write at the end of your bio, you're a parishioner at St. Bartholomew in Fort Worth, Texas, with a lovely wife of 18 years, 2 beautiful children, and you have a passion, there's that word again, for working with underprivileged, at-risk youth, troubled teens, gang members, prison ministry. It's so beautiful that you've taken your roots and God has perfected them, and I'm sure he's still working on it, but you know what I mean, and using you to do great things. You mentioned some of the great things that God's using you for, performed and ministering coast to coast, World Youth Day, like you mentioned, in Brazil, which is just crazy to me. That's awesome. The National Catholic Youth Conference in 2015. You're doing that again this year. 5 albums released as a Christian artist, available on iTunes. So check that out. C2Six. So here's what I want to do. Go ahead.
Having a little bit of a hard time hearing you. It's cutting out just a little bit.
Oh man, I'm so sorry. It's okay.
No problem.
It's okay. This will all be on podcast. You can share it with your friends, and they can hear it that way.
Okay.
So
I got you now. I can hear you now.
Cool. Can you hear me now? Good.
Oh yeah.
So here's what I want to do. I want to, instead of just talking about it, I want to let people listen to your music. We're going to listen to Feels Good, but before we do, I want you to just kind of introduce this song, tell us what it's about, then we'll give it a listen.
I actually wrote this song from the experience we talked about earlier, when I for the first time I felt like God loved me, right? And it was the greatest feeling I had ever felt in my life. And so with the song, isn't about the experience per se, but it's about, when you realize that, when you know that God loves you, nothing else feels better. And so I basically go through the line of all the things that I love in life, and say that God's love is even better than those things. So, for example, homemade tamales,
Oh
God's
man,
love is better than that,
it's
And so
close. It's a
that's what the
close one, but
song
I think
does.
you're right. uh,
So that's what the song basically is about, and it was based on from that experience.
cool. We're gonna go ahead and give it a listen.
Alrighty.
It's your boy C2Six. We feeling real good because we know that we're loved by God. And God's love is amazing. Let them know what it feels like.
It's better than some homemade tamales. And it's better than a plate full of beans and nobody. It's better than the money that I made moving llaves. Our God is just great, pero ya tú sabes. It's better than a 6'4" with a top down. Catching a breeze, riding through Funtown. It's better than your favorite rapper of all time. And better than the Tupac albums all combined. It's better than the day when you get off parole. And better than the day when our troops come home. It's better than a Powerball lottery ticket with the winning numbers and nobody else hit it. It's better than a cold brew when it gets hot, or a day off of work playing on the Xbox. I'm feeling God's love cause I'm full of his grace. It made me want to spread it all over the place, and that's real. It feels so good to know that you're loved by God. Let me hear you say, hey, hey. It feels so good to know that you're loved by God. Let me hear you say, hey, hey. It feels so good to know that you're loved by God. Everybody say, hey, hey. It feels so good to know that you're loved by God. It's really no doubt, his love is amazing. It's better than the first day of summer vacation. It's better than an Escalade or a Range Rover, or paying all the bills with money left over. It's better than a day in the sun at the beach, or them checks that you cash on the 1st and 15th. It's better than you feel when you get debt free, or watching a kung fu flick by Bruce Lee. It's better than a drive through window with no waiting, or a day in this rap game where haters ain't hating. It's better than a brand new pair of Air Jordans, or a sliced up cake and you got the large portion. It's better than your first date or your first kiss, or getting every present on your Christmas list. I'm feeling God's love cause I'm full of his grace. It made me want to spread it all over the place, and that's real. It feels so good to know that you're loved by God. Let me hear you say, hey, hey. It feels so good to know that you're loved by God. Let me hear you say, hey, hey. It feels so good to know that you're loved by God. Everybody say, hey, hey. It feels so good to know that you're loved by God.
This has been another AMDG production. This is all for the greater glory of God. God is love. And don't you forget that it feels so good to know that you're loved by God. All you gotta do is ask and you receive him. AMDG.
Feels so good.
Hey,
Dude.
hey.
That's awesome, man. I love that song. It like perfectly encapsulates your story, everything we've been talking about today. Dude, let's get people, I feel like people are really going to enjoy our conversation. So let's get people connected to you, man. How can people listen to your music? How can people find you on the internet? How can people find you on social media, all that stuff?
Well, the easiest thing to do is probably just to Google me, the letter C, the number 2, and 6 is spelled out, so it's C2Six. You'll find the links to my Facebook, my YouTube, my Instagram, my Twitter, all that type of stuff. Music's available on iTunes and pretty much almost every I'm looking for every outlet, every online outlet, right? And then also we've got a foundation. It's not my personal page, but we do have a foundation, Pandora. So if you go on Pandora and just look up Foundation, you'll find our music as well on Pandora.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I know you just released a new video on YouTube. Why don't you explain that a little bit?
Oh, if you go to that's at Foundation YouTube. So you might want to Google Foundation as well. Foundation, Foundation, Catholic rap, And we have a new video. It's called "I Wonder." It was filmed in Chicago. It was actually with the help of, or in association with El Padrecito Ministries, Father Marcel Gonzalez. Shout out to him. And we filmed it in Chicago. And so we were out there, and it's called "I Wonder," and it's basically just talking about, man, no matter how many times we fall, God keeps calling us back to to use us, for his purposes. And I'm kind of like talking about, I wonder why he keeps calling me back as wretched of a sinner as I am. Keep calling me back and keep having mercy on me. So that's what it's about. It's there's some materialistic imagery on it, but that's purposely done because it's we're talking about the struggles we've had. Sometimes it's a material struggle. Somebody with one particular person on the song, it's about alcohol and whatnot. But don't you gotta look past that. You gotta look past that.
I got you, man. Dude, thanks so much for coming on. I really, really enjoyed talking to you, getting to know you a little bit. And you have such a powerful story. You've got a powerful music, man. And just thank you from the bottom of my heart for spending this time with me.
No, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Look forward to our next conversation.
Dude, it's going to happen. It really is going to happen. So before you go, we were talking about social media, and you do this thing on Facebook, these dad jokes. And they're like either absolutely tremendous or absolutely terrible. So I have a Christian dad joke for you. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
We scheduled this interview, and I've been saving this just for you. I was sitting in Mass, and I thought of you. When few weeks ago, we had the gospel reading of "My yoke is easy, my burden is light," and I had just read your Facebook post. So I said, "How does Jesus like his eggs?" Yolks over easy and light. All right, there you go. That's just for you. Everybody else is gonna hate me, but that's for you. Hey, thanks so much for coming on, guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Me sharing my heart in the first segment. I'm just so thankful for all the things that God's doing in me for the first time. It feels like in weeks and months. And so thank you. Check out the show on iTunes. Go to ForteCatholic.com. You can find all the shows. You can find links to all of Carlos's stuff. We'll be back next week. See ya!